My brother harassed and physically assaulted my girlfriend at a wedding. Our parents defended him, and now he's in prison for domestic violence. Everything spiraled out of control in a way I never could have imagined, starting with one evening that was supposed to be a celebration. The moment my girlfriend Amelia, 25, a pediatric nurse, walked into my cousin's wedding reception, my younger brother Eric's behavior turned inappropriate. He didn't just greet her like a normal person. No, he practically shoved our mother aside just to be the first to wrap her in a hug, one that lingered far too long. Amelia had to take a deliberate step back just to create some space between them. I noticed the discomfort on her face immediately, but she tried to hide it with a polite smile. She wanted to make a good impression. It was, after all, her first time meeting my family. Throughout the evening, Eric kept coming up with flimsy excuses to touch her shoulder or graze her arm, completely unsolicited and definitely unwelcome. He told absurd, inside jokes that made no sense because they'd only just met, trying to manufacture some kind of fake familiarity. He shoved past me multiple times, even at the table, deliberately switching seats to end up beside her. The tipping point came when he picked up a bite of food with his own fork and tried to feed her with it, holding it in front of her while making intense, unsettling eye contact. Amelia was clearly uncomfortable, but she kept trying to be gracious. She's the kind of person who gives people the benefit of the doubt. She didn't want to ruin what was supposed to be a joyful family occasion. I knew she was trying to get through the night without causing a scene. Meanwhile, Eric kept steering the conversation to embarrassing stories about me from when I was a kid. He twisted childhood memories to paint me as some kind of loser or unstable weirdo. He even made up an outrageous lie about having to rescue one of my high school girlfriends from my so-called emotional abuse, a complete fabrication. Amelia knew the story wasn't true. I had already told her about those years of my life, including the breakup he was referring to. But what shook me more than Eric's lies was how my parents just sat there at the dinner table, nodding along with everything he said as if it were gospel. After dinner, things took a darker turn. Amelia offered to help clean up, always eager to pitch in. I had stepped out to help my dad carry some boxes to the garage and hadn't noticed that Amelia hadn't come back yet. That's when I realized she'd been gone too long. I went looking for her, and that's when I found her in the kitchen, backed into the corner near the sink. Eric was standing directly in front of her, arms braced on the counter on either side, effectively boxing her in. He was invading her personal space, standing so close, his chest nearly touched hers. He was telling her she deserved someone more exciting than her boring, emotionally unstable boyfriend, me. Amelia had already asked him twice to back off, but he didn't listen. When she saw me come in, the relief on her face was instant. She immediately came to stand beside me without saying a word. I could feel her shaking as she grabbed my hand. Eric just chuckled and tried to laugh it off like he'd been joking the whole time. But it wasn't funny. It was the start of a nightmare neither of us was prepared for. To understand just how we got to this point where my brother Eric could corner my girlfriend in a kitchen and act like it was his right, you have to know a little about the way we were raised. It wasn't just that Eric was spoiled. It was that from the very beginning, I was held responsible for everything that went wrong, and Eric could do no wrong, even when he did something truly awful. We grew up in an upper-middle-class suburb outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. Our parents, Jack and Donna, have worked in real estate since before either of us were born. They've built up a comfortable life, but their top priority has always been appearances. How people perceived us, how perfect we looked from the outside, mattered more than what was actually going on inside the house. Eric was born when I was 3, and from the moment he came home, he became their golden boy. It didn't matter what he did, how he behaved, or who he hurt, he was the center of their universe. Meanwhile, I was expected to be the responsible one, the example setter, the one who knew better. When Eric was 6, he deliberately smashed my brand new game console because I told him he couldn't play until I finished my homework. My parents didn't punish him. Instead, they bought him his own gaming system the very next day and lectured me about how I should have shared better. It only escalated from there. When he was 12, he fed my pet guinea pig Waffles a chunk of dark chocolate, something he knew was toxic. Waffles died a few hours later. I was devastated, sobbing in the hallway while my parents insisted it was an accident. They said I should have been more responsible with pets if I couldn't keep them safe. In high school, Eric got jealous when I started dating a girl named Morgan. We were serious about each other and things were going well until rumors started circulating that I had cheated on her. I didn't know where they were coming from until Morgan told me she heard it straight from Eric. When I confronted him, he laughed in my face. My parents. They said he was just looking out for her, that he was being protective, as if slandering me was some noble act. This wasn't just a pattern, it was the blueprint of our family dynamic. Eric did what he wanted. I was expected to deal with it and clean up the mess. He never had to face consequences. I always paid the price. Even as adults, nothing changed. Eric still lives with our parents, working a half-hearted job at my dad's real estate office, coming and going as he pleases. He parties with the same toxic crew he's been hanging out with since high school. Guys who treat him like a king because he throws around our parents' money like it's his own. Every relationship I've ever had has somehow ended up under Eric's microscope. He's meddled, lied, sabotaged, all, while our parents turned a blind eye or told me I was imagining things. So when I met Amelia, I decided to do things differently. Amelia is the best thing that's ever happened to me. She's intelligent, warm-hearted, and one of the most compassionate people I've ever known. We met in the coffee shop at Glen Hill Medical Center, the hospital where she works. I was there visiting a coworker recovering from surgery, and she was on her lunch break. We bonded over how bad the coffee was of all things. A few more shared coffee breaks turned into dates, and from there things just clicked. We've been together for 8 months now, and up until recently everything was going perfectly. Amelia knows about my past. I didn't want to hide anything from her. I told her the truth about my relationship with my family, especially about Eric. I thought maybe if I was upfront, it would help prepare her in case things went sideways. She listened, and then because she always believes in the best version of people, she suggested we give my family a chance. Maybe things will be different now that you're all grown up, she said. I wanted to believe that too. So after 3 months of keeping our relationship private, I finally agreed to introduce her to them. My parents were hosting a dinner party at their house in Shaker Heights, and it felt like the right time. I told Amelia she didn't have to go if she was uncomfortable, but she insisted. I want to meet the people who raised you, she said, smiling, even if they didn't do a great job. She tried to make light of it, but I could tell she was nervous. So was I. Still, we both went in with an open mind. That dinner is where it all began to unravel. At first, the evening felt slightly awkward but manageable. Then Eric showed up. As I mentioned, he made a scene from the moment he laid eyes on her. His overlong hug, the excessive touching, the weird jokes. It was like he was trying to stake some claim on her in front of everyone. But it wasn't until a few days later that things truly began to spiral. Amelia started receiving strange calls and texts from unfamiliar numbers. Some were just hang-ups, others had nothing but breathing on the other end. Then came voicemails, disgusting, sexist ones, calling her stuck up and cold for supposedly turning down someone better. The messages included unsettling specifics about her daily routine, what color scrubs she'd worn that day, where she parked her car. It was obvious someone was watching her. She didn't put it together right away, but I did. The voices, they were familiar. A few of them belonged to Eric's old friends from high school, guys I hadn't seen in years, but who still hovered around him like flies, the kind who think harassment is a game and boundaries are suggestions. Amelia blocked the numbers, but they just switched phones and kept calling. It was escalating, and I had a sinking feeling I knew exactly who was behind it. After Amelia blocked the initial wave of numbers, the harassment didn't stop, it mutated. That's when Eric's involvement became undeniable. A week after the dinner party, Amelia noticed unfamiliar faces lurking around the pediatric wing at Glen Hill Medical Center where she worked. They didn't have visitor badges. They weren't talking to any patients or staff. They just stood in corners watching. And when Amelia walked by, they made vague, unsettling comments soft enough not to get caught but loud enough for her to hear. It wasn't subtle. At first she thought she might be imagining it. But one evening after a late shift, she walked out to the parking garage and saw one of those men following her. He kept a careful distance, never running but close enough that every time she glanced back, he was still there. She made it to her car, locked the doors, and called me immediately. She was crying, terrified to start the engine in case they were waiting for her to leave so they could follow. I dropped everything and raced to the hospital. When I got there, I drove her car while a friend followed behind us in his truck just to make sure we weren't being tailed. Amelia clutched her phone the entire ride home, too scared to speak. That night, she barely slept. That became the new normal: panic attacks before every shift, jumping at every unfamiliar face in the hallways, second-guessing whether she could continue doing the work she loved. We tried to talk to hospital security, but without concrete proof, there wasn't much they could do. They increased patrols near the garage and made notes in incident logs, but it felt more like a formality than protection. That was the tipping point for me. I started gathering evidence. I saved every voicemail, took screenshots of every text. Amelia and I compiled time-stamped lists of sightings at the hospital. Her coworkers, especially two nurses and an ER tech, began backing her up, saying they'd noticed the same men hanging around, but hadn't realized how serious it was. Eventually, we matched one of the phone numbers to an old burner Eric had used in college. Another name came up: Chase Harlan, a close friend of Eric's who still lived in our hometown and had a history of harassment complaints from his time in community college. I finally had enough. I printed everything: calls, messages, images from hospital security cameras. Then I drove straight to my parents' house where Eric still lived. I confronted him directly, laid all the evidence out on their kitchen counter. Eric didn't even flinch. He sat there with this smug, satisfied look like none of it mattered. When I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing, he shrugged and said, maybe if Amelia wasn't such an uptight princess, people wouldn't feel the need to teach her how to loosen up. I saw red. What came next wasn't planned. My fist connected with his jaw before I could even register that I'd thrown a punch. Eric immediately started howling like I had broken his jaw even though I'd barely landed the punch. It was a clean shot to his cheek, enough to start a nosebleed, but nowhere near as dramatic as he made it seem. He stumbled backward, clutching his face like I'd pulled a weapon on him. Of course, my parents came running the moment they heard the commotion. My mom gasped like she'd walked in on a murder scene, while my dad's face turned crimson with rage. But not at Eric. At me. Before I could even explain, my mom was already shrieking about her poor baby being attacked. My dad shoved me backward and yelled about how I'd finally snapped, how he always knew I had anger problems. I tried to show them the evidence, the stack of printouts with call logs, screenshots, voicemails, everything. But they didn't even glance at it. They refused to look. You assaulted your brother in our home, Dad snapped, pointing toward the door. Get out, and don't come back until you've apologized to him and gotten yourself some damn therapy. Mom, still clutching Eric, was crying hysterically. You need help, Jordan. You've always been jealous of your brother, and now you're trying to ruin his life because your girlfriend couldn't handle a little attention. A little attention. Amelia had been stalked, cornered, harassed for weeks, and my parents were brushing it off like it was schoolyard teasing. When I told them everything, how Amelia had been followed, the creepy voicemails, the security footage from her workplace, my mom actually rolled her eyes and said, well, maybe she shouldn't have led him on at the dinner. She was awfully flirty, don't you think? I was speechless. These were the people who raised me, who claimed to love me. And here they were gaslighting me in real time, defending a predator because that predator happened to be their golden child. My dad gestured at the door again, voice cold and final. Unless you're here to make amends, leave. And don't you dare bring her back into this house until you've sorted yourself out. I left without another word. I didn't even take the evidence with me. There was no point. That night I stayed at Amelia's apartment. She cried for hours. She was terrified to go to work the next day, terrified of being followed again, terrified of losing the job she loved because of something she didn't cause. Her supervisor had been understanding so far, but we both knew patience wouldn't last forever. Rumors had started to swirl. Coworkers had begun whispering. The stress was beginning to take its toll on her. She wasn't eating, she barely slept. She jumped every time her phone rang. I didn't know what to do. I had all the evidence, but it didn't seem to matter. My family had closed ranks around Eric, pretending the whole thing was fiction. The police wouldn't take action unless we could directly tie the harassment to him, and even then, they seemed disinterested. Meanwhile, the woman I loved was falling apart, and I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. A few days after I punched Eric and was effectively exiled from my parents' home, my mom started reaching out again. First, it was voicemails filled with sobbing and appeals for family unity. Then came the texts. She said they wanted to fix things, that Eric was sorry, that they'd had a long talk with him about boundaries and how his behavior had crossed the line. She said they understood now that Amelia had felt uncomfortable and they just wanted a chance to make amends. It sounded too good to be true. Still, after several days of pressure, Amelia and I talked it over. She was understandably hesitant, but she's always been the kind of person who tries to give people another chance, even when they don't deserve it. If they really want to apologize, she said cautiously, maybe it's worth hearing them out. Just once. So we agreed to meet them at their house for dinner, neutral territory, no surprises, no extended relatives. Just us, Eric, and my parents. At least that's what they said. But from the moment we pulled up, something felt wrong. Their driveway was packed with cars. When we stepped inside, I saw not only my parents and Eric, but also our Aunt Caroline and Uncle Nate, two people who had always taken Eric's side no matter the circumstances. And then I saw them. Tyler Chase and another one of Eric's friends, the same group of men who had been loitering around Amelia's workplace. The very people we'd caught on security footage. "This is supposed to be a family dinner," I asked, my voice low controlled. My mom clapped her hands together and said cheerfully, "It's more like a family intervention. We thought it was time to really talk things through." Talk, it turned out, was code for attack. For the next 2 hours, Amelia was subjected to a barrage of accusations, character assassinations, and victim blaming. My mom launched into a long-winded speech about how Amelia must be jealous of Eric's success and had probably misunderstood his friendly nature. My aunt chimed in, saying Amelia was likely used to being the center of attention at work and had confused admiration with harassment. They called her dramatic, unstable, emotionally fragile. Eric sat on the couch with his hands clasped in front of him, putting on a performance worthy of a bad soap opera. He shook his head and sighed repeatedly, acting confused and hurt. "I just don't understand," he kept saying. "I thought we were getting along. I was really hoping to have a sister-in-law someday." Tyler and Chase backed him up, claiming they had only been at the hospital visiting Tyler's sick grandmother. Somehow that same grandmother must have been moving between wings of the pediatric unit every other day for 2 weeks straight. The worst moment came when they began questioning Amelia's mental state. They pointed out that she worked night shifts and dealt with critically ill children, suggesting she was projecting her stress onto innocent interactions. My mom even handed her a business card for a therapist, saying she could work through her drama with a professional. Amelia tried to defend herself. She brought out her phone and played the voicemails again, showed the messages, pointed out timestamps, but every attempt to present the truth was met with dismissiveness or accusations that she was manipulating the situation. When Tyler, unprompted, described what Amelia had worn on specific days at work, proving he had indeed been watching her, my parents acted like that confirmed she was seeking attention. That's when Amelia started to hyperventilate. The fallout from that so-called family intervention was immediate. Amelia couldn't return to work without breaking down in tears. I filed for a restraining order with the help of a lawyer we'd hired, but the legal process was moving slowly, too slowly for how quickly things were deteriorating. Then came my cousin Rachel's wedding. Rachel and I had always been close. She was the only person in the family besides my grandfather who had ever seen Eric for who he really was. When we were kids, she once caught him pulling the legs off a frog behind our grandparents' house. She told everyone what she saw, but my parents convinced the family she was lying to get attention. Rachel never forgot that. So when she invited us to her wedding, she called Amelia and me personally. "I know things are bad," she said, "but I promise Eric is only on the guest list because my parents insisted. I've hired extra security. I seated you with my fiancé's family nowhere near our side. Please come." After everything that had happened, we hesitated. But Rachel had stood up for us so many times. We wanted to support her. We thought with so many people around, Eric wouldn't dare pull anything. We were wrong. The ceremony itself was beautiful and uneventful. Eric was a groomsman, which kept him distracted for most of it. At the reception, things started off okay. Amelia was finally relaxing. She smiled again. She even laughed, something I hadn't seen in weeks. We were sitting at a table across the room from my parents and Eric talking with Rachel's new in-laws. Around 9:00 p.m., Amelia excused herself to go to the bathroom. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I glanced toward Eric's table and he was gone. My stomach dropped. I stood up and made my way toward the hallway near the restrooms. Before I even reached the corner, I heard Amelia scream. I ran. By the time I got there, Rachel's husband Daniel and his younger brother, who's a police officer from out of state, had already pulled Eric off her. He had her pinned against the wall just outside the women's restroom. One hand was over her mouth. The other gripped her arm hard enough to leave bruises. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. She was crying, trembling eyes wide with shock and fear. Eric was wasted, red-faced and wild-eyed. He started shouting that Amelia had been teasing him all night, that she had followed him into the hallway. She hadn't even looked at him all evening. Daniel's brother immediately called the police, while Rachel and her mother rushed to Amelia's side. They took her to a quiet room and tried to calm her down. When the officers arrived, my parents did exactly what I expected. They tried to stop the arrest. My mom screamed about misunderstandings and how this was just a drunken mistake. My dad actually tried to stand between the officers and Eric, saying they should handle this within the family. Eric alternated between crying about being seduced and threatening everyone around him. When they finally handcuffed him and placed him in the back of the squad car, he shouted through the open window, "That girl's a lying slut. She wanted it from the start." Several guests recorded the entire thing on their phones. In the days following the wedding, our lives were consumed by fallout. Eric's arrest made headlines in our hometown. Guests had already shared videos online and word spread fast. But the real war wasn't public, it was inside the family. My parents immediately launched a smear campaign calling every relative who hadn't already seen the footage. They claimed Amelia had lured Eric into a private hallway and made a move on him. When he rejected her, they said she screamed assault out of spite. They said the whole thing was orchestrated to ruin Eric's future and paint him as some kind of predator. They even tried to say Daniel and his brother roughed Eric up before the police arrived, which was a complete lie. The video footage showed exactly what happened, but my parents weren't interested in the truth. They were interested in rewriting the story. The only silver lining was the wedding video itself. The videographer had captured Eric leaving his seat and following Amelia toward the restrooms. That alone contradicted his claim that she had come after him. When added to the bruises on her arms, the torn dress, and witness statements from at least 5 guests, our lawyer told us we had a strong case. Rachel, bless her, rallied behind us. She collected statements from everyone she could and stayed in touch with our attorney. Amelia and I were grateful but exhausted. The emotional toll was unbearable. Then my parents escalated their pressure campaign. They threatened to cut me off financially, laughable since I'd been financially independent for years. My dad threatened to ruin me professionally, even though I worked in tech and had zero ties to his real estate firm. Their words made it clear they didn't see me as a separate adult. I was just an extension of Eric's story, and now I was destroying the family. My mom called me at work one afternoon sobbing. "He's your brother," she cried. "You're sending your own blood to prison. You're choosing that girl over your own family." But the most chilling moment came a few days later when they showed up at our apartment. They pounded on the door for 15 minutes. Our neighbors called the building security, who in turn contacted the police. My mom was hysterical in the hallway, screaming about how I was abandoning my family. My dad stood behind her stone-faced, promising I'd regret everything. We didn't let them in. That night, Amelia and I made a decision. She accepted a position at a hospital 300 miles away, an offer she had been hesitant to take before. I got approval from my employer to work fully remote, and we made plans to relocate. Some people might see that as running away, but we saw it as reclaiming our lives. We'd tried everything to resolve things civilly. We had shown evidence, told the truth, sought legal help, and in return we'd been gaslighted, attacked, and betrayed. We were done. Eric might have been in handcuffs, but the damage he'd done and the people who enabled him still haunted us. It was time to start over, far from their reach. 4 years passed. Life somehow became quiet, peaceful. For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the next blow from my family, for the next betrayal. Amelia and I built something new, something sacred. We got married in a small ceremony by Lake Champlain, surrounded by Rachel's family, our closest friends, and Amelia's parents, who had stood by her with unwavering strength. Holly officiated. It was simple, beautiful, and without drama. A far cry from the chaos of where we came from. We bought a house just outside Burlington, Vermont, in a quiet neighborhood with a big yard and tall pine trees. Amelia became the head pediatric nurse at her hospital. I stayed with my tech firm and eventually earned a promotion to senior developer. A few months ago, we welcomed our daughter, Emma Grace. She's perfect. Becoming parents changed everything, not just practically but spiritually. We realized even more deeply how important it was to protect her from the generational rot we both came from. Emma would grow up knowing love without conditions, boundaries without manipulation, and discipline without fear. Then, out of nowhere, the past came knocking again. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was in a Zoom meeting when my phone buzzed repeatedly. I ignored it at first until I saw the voicemail transcription. "Please, Jordan, it's your mother. It's about Eric. Please call me back." I stepped out of the meeting, heart pounding, not with panic but dread. When I finally returned the call, I was met with frantic sobs. Eric had gotten married the year before to a woman named Laura, whom we'd never heard of. Apparently, they met at church and their families arranged things quickly. My parents had celebrated it like it was a redemption arc. He finally found a woman who understands him. My mother had written in her Christmas card to a distant cousin. But now Laura had been hospitalized. 2 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, extensive bruising. Her coworker had called the police after she failed to show up to work 3 days in a row. The police investigation uncovered everything. Eric had been beating her for months, and my father, still clinging to his image of control, had been helping him cover it up. He threatened Laura's parents, interfered with her job, and convinced others that she was unstable when she tried to speak up. The same tactics they used against Amelia. This time it didn't work. Eric was arrested for felony domestic abuse. My father was charged with witness intimidation and obstruction of justice. My mother begged me to return. "Your family needs you," she cried. "We have to stick together now." I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just asked her one question. Where was this energy when Amelia was the one screaming for help? There was silence on the line. Then she broke down completely, sobbing about how she and Dad had thought they were protecting him, how they should have gotten help years ago. Too late. Later that week, I received a 12-page handwritten letter from her. She confessed everything, how they had always known something was wrong with Eric, how they had minimized it out of fear and shame, how they failed both of their sons in different ways. We haven't responded yet. Maybe one day we'll allow a supervised visit between her and Emma. Maybe. But for now, we've closed that chapter. We're surrounded by people we love who respect us and each other. Rachel now volunteers with domestic abuse nonprofits. Laura is living with her sister in Oregon, healing and finally free. As for us, Amelia is back at work part-time now, director of pediatric nursing. I'm preparing to launch my own software consulting business. We're not running anymore. We're building. And most importantly, we've broken the cycle. Emma will never know the pain that haunted us. She'll grow up in a home where truth is honored, boundaries are sacred, and love is earned, not weaponized. Sometimes walking away from family isn't giving up. It's choosing freedom. And freedom is how we end this story.